Some companies didn't fail because they made terrible mistakes. They failed because they made spectacular mistakes. Decisions were praised, approved in long meetings, and defended with impeccable charts. Everything seemed responsible, modern, and well thought out. The problem is that these choices only made sense to those inside the room. From the outside, the mistake was already glaringly obvious. The unsettling detail is that these errors were too simple to seem dangerous. They didn't require advanced calculations or complex theories. All it took was observing behavior, habits, and basic logic. When someone needs to over-justify a decision, it's usually because it doesn't stand on its own. That's precisely why explaining these cases as if to a child makes everything obvious too quickly. In this video, each story shows how choices that seemed safe created major consequences. One decision leads to another. A small deviation opens up an opportunity for someone more attentive. And by the time the company realizes it, the public has already made a different choice. If you understand this pattern while it's still simple, you avoid repeating mistakes that cost others billions to learn from. At first, everything seemed flawless. Efficient cars, a nice environmental message, and numbers that reassured any regulator. The story of Volkswagen. It's noteworthy precisely because of this. It came from a respected company with decades of solid engineering. For many people in the United States, including families of German origin scattered throughout the country, the brand carried an almost automatic aura of trust. The problem is that this trust became a crutch. While marketing talked about cleaner air, the car's software only learned to behave differently during official tests. It was like praising the cleanliness of a room without looking under the bed. The mistake wasn't technical, it was mental. When a company believes too much in its own reputation, it starts treating rules as adjustable details. And this type of thinking usually comes at a high price, not just in fines, but in credibility. The most troubling aspect is that the deception didn't arise from nothing. It was built up gradually, decision after decision, always with well-rehearsed internal justifications. It's just a temporary adjustment. We'll fix it later. Nobody will notice. This script is also common outside of companies, in the daily lives of those who procrastinate on financial or professional problems. In the United States, where the pressure for performance is constant, this type of shortcut often seems acceptable in the short term. The attentive mentor always warns, when the solution seems too simple, it's worth looking twice. Companies that train their teams to question strange orders tend to avoid this type of disaster. One applicable practice is to create independent reviews with people who gain nothing by agreeing with the decision. This applies to business, career, and even personal choices. Those who learn this early avoid long-term setbacks later on. Ultimately, this case shows that appearances don't hold up to truth for long. The market, regulators, and people always put the pieces together. When the bill came due, it came with high interest rates and a global impact. If this analysis makes sense to you, it's worth subscribing to the channel to continue following stories that seem simple, but hide lessons too big to ignore. And there's more. This type of mistake doesn't only happen when someone lies, but also when someone buys something without considering whether it really fits with what already exists. That's exactly where the next story comes in. When Tobey decided to buy the Skype, the logic seemed elegant on paper. A large digital marketplace coupled with a direct communication tool sounded like a natural progression. For many executives, especially in a competitive environment like the United States, rapid growth is often confused with healthy growth. The acquisition was expensive, noisy, and celebrated. But the next day, nobody knew exactly what to do with the new asset. Integration didn't flow, the teams didn't speak the same language, and real-world use fell short of the promise. It's like adopting an exotic animal without knowing where it will sleep or what it will eat. The mistake wasn't buying, it was buying without a clear fit. This type of decision stems from the fear of falling behind. When competitors grow, the temptation is to pile up acquisitions like trophies. The experienced mentor observes that synergy isn't declared, it's built. Before any purchase, mature companies test small projects, internal pilots, and temporary partnerships. In day-to-day operations, this translates into a simple rule. If something new doesn't directly improve what you already do well, it becomes a distraction. For investors or entrepreneurs, it's worth studying successful acquisition cases, such as when Amazon bought companies that strengthen logistics and data, not just catchy names. Growth requires focus, not haste. And here's the question that separates curiosity from real learning. How many times have you seen a company buy another just to say they bought it, without clearly explaining why? Comment below which famous acquisition you think never made sense from the start. This reflection sets the stage for the next classic mistake, because it's not just buying too much that confuses the public. Sometimes offering too many options creates the same paralyzing effect. And that's exactly what happened when a giant decided to reinvent its own menu. For a long time, the McDonald's it was synonymous with an easy decision. Go in, order, eat, and move on without overthinking. At some point, someone decided that simplicity seemed outdated. The menu began to grow, gaining sophisticated items, long names, and combinations that required pausing to read. For an audience accustomed to speed, this sounded strange. In the United States, where many people have lunch during a short break at work or between appointments, this change created friction. The customer didn't want to choose like in a fine restaurant. They wanted to satisfy their hunger. When a brand's proposition deviates from the audience's habits, the unease quickly arises. An excess of options often stems from good intentions. The idea was to please more people, reach different audiences, and appear modern. An attentive mentor knows that more choice doesn't always lead to more satisfaction. In consumer psychology, this is called decision overload. The more options, the greater the chance of giving up or becoming frustrated. An applicable example is observing digital companies that reduce menus and screens to guide the user. Services like streaming apps often highlight only a few choices at a time to avoid tiring the user. In practical life, this applies to work and even to eating. Planning simple meals for the week, for example, reduces stress and improves consistency. Clarity almost always wins over excessive variety. When the brand realized the confusion, it simplified again and focused on what really worked. This adjustment teaches a direct lesson. If the audience needs to think too much to buy, something has gone wrong. If this reflection made sense, leave a like on the video because that helps the channel continue dissecting mistakes that seem small, but change everything. And speaking of bad choices, there's an even more curious case. A company that had practically everything in its hands, but let the biggest crown on the internet slip away by ignoring where the real value lay. For a long time, the Yahoo! It was the gateway to the internet. Email, news, finance, sports. Everything lived there. For many people in the United States, including Asian communities that had settled in the country and adopted the service as a daily routine, Yahoo! Seemed unbeatable. However, while focusing its energy on being a large portal, it failed to treat search and advertising as the heart of the business. The traffic was there, the attention too, but intelligent monetization took a back seat. It's like organizing the best neighborhood game and forgetting to invite the people who bring the toys that keep everyone entertained. The mistake wasn't a lack of audience. It was a misinterpretation of what sustained the game. The astute mentor observes that leadership breeds complacency when strategic discipline is lacking. Yahoo! Saw emerging trends, but preferred to adjust what already worked rather than delve into what could dominate the future. Companies that win in the long term do the opposite. They choose a few pillars and invest in them persistently. For those who work with content, digital business, or career development, the lesson is practical. Identify the core value of what you do and strengthen that before diversifying. In the online world, this might mean mastering one channel, one format, or one offering before opening 5 new fronts. Focus is not a limitation, it's leverage. And here's the question that really provokes reflection. If you were in a leadership position, would you have insisted on being a large portal? Or would you have bet everything on search and advertising when there was still time? Comment on what you would have done differently. This answer helps to understand why some companies not only make strategic mistakes, but also resist basic changes. And when this resistance encounters an entire market migrating elsewhere, the impact is usually definitive, as happened with a giant in physical retail that ignored digital for too long. For decades, the Sears It was an absolute benchmark in retail. Famous catalogs, large stores, public trust, and a presence in practically every country. For many families in the United States, including descendants of European and Latin American immigrants who built a life in the country, shopping at Sears was almost a domestic ritual. The problem began when consumer behavior changed, and the company treated this as a passing fad. While people were learning to shop online, the company insisted on physical aisles and outdated models. The mistake wasn't being unaware of the digital world, it was underestimating it. When reality changed, the structure didn't keep up. The experienced mentor realizes that companies like this confuse tradition with strategy. History helps open doors, but it alone doesn't sustain future decisions. Sears had the logistics, brand, and relationships to migrate early to e-commerce. What it lacked was the courage to change its own model before someone else did it for it. An applicable example is observing companies that reinvented themselves in time, such as retailers that integrated physical stores with online shopping, quick pickups, and efficient deliveries. In personal and professional life, this translates to updating skills before they become obsolete. Learning digital tools, understanding new forms of consumption, and keeping up with changing behaviors has ceased to be a differentiator and has become a matter of survival. When the internet became the standard, There was no more room for slow adaptation. The public had already chosen another path. The downfall didn't happen overnight, but as a result of a series of decisions that seemed too safe to question. This case closes an important cycle. It's not just lying, buying the wrong things, or confusing the customer that brings companies down. Ignoring simple changes is often enough. After hearing all these stories, it's hard not to look at your own decisions more carefully. These mistakes didn't happen due to a lack of resources, nor a lack of competent people. They arose when someone stopped observing the basics and began to rely too much on what seemed correct on paper. The practical application of this is simple. Question choices that seem too sophisticated, reduce noise, and return to the essentials. Whether in business, career, or money, sound decisions are usually easy to explain. It's worth asking yourself, what decisions have you been defending simply because everyone around you agrees? Where are you complicating something that could be simple? What clear sign have you noticed but chosen to ignore out of comfort or habit? Thinking about this doesn't require radical changes. It requires attention. Small adjustments made early prevent painful corrections later. And those who learn from others' mistakes save time, energy, and frustration. If this content has helped you see decisions in a different light, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you can keep learning before seemingly harmless choices turn into problems that are too big to ignore.